My name is Mia Carlisle and I'm 34. My family threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash, and 12 hours later they were begging me to save my sister's wedding. Lily had just turned 7. The cake said her name in blue icing. I found it face down in my mother's kitchen garbage while the whole family toasted my sister Brooke's engagement in the next room. My mom told me not to make a scene. I didn't. I picked my daughter up, I drove her home, and I built her a new birthday in my own kitchen with a grocery store cake and 7 candles. But here's what none of them knew yet. The wedding wasn't falling apart by accident. It was falling apart because of something with my name on it. And what I did about that? I would do again tomorrow. Welcome back to Quiet Reckonings. This is the channel for the people who were always told they were the strong one, the ones who finally stopped apologizing for it. If a story like this finds you tonight, you're not alone here. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. In my family, there were 2 kinds of children. There was Brooke, who needed things. And there was me, who didn't. Nobody ever said it out loud. They didn't have to. When Brooke was 9, she spent a winter in and out of the hospital with a kidney infection, and my mother decided, somewhere in those cold months, that the world owed Brooke a softer landing for the rest of her life. I was 11. I learned to pour my own cereal and sign my own permission slips. By the time I was a teenager, the family had a name for me. Mia's so independent. It sounded like a compliment. It functioned like a job. So when I started planning Lily's 7th birthday, I did it the way I did everything. Quietly, alone, and on my own dime. I booked a small backyard afternoon. I ordered the cake she wanted, vanilla with blue frosting. Then my mother called. "Honey, we're all getting together Saturday anyway," she said. "Why don't we just fold Lily's little thing in? Brooke's got news. It'll be easier." Easier. That word again. It always meant easier for them. I should have said no. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Sure, Mom, that's fine," because that was the script, and I'd been reading my lines for 30 years. Lily was thrilled either way. She drew a card for Grandma the night before. I watched her color it in at the kitchen table and told myself this year would be different. I read other people's financial messes for a living. I never once thought to audit my own family. We pulled into my mother's driveway at 1 o'clock. The first thing I saw was the balloons. Gold and white, tied to the porch rail, spelling out a single word. Congrats. Not Lily's name, not a single 7 anywhere. Inside, the dining table had been turned into a shrine. Brooke's engagement photos sat in little gold frames down the center. There was a guest book. There was a champagne fountain on the counter, already humming. And shoved into the far corner of the kitchen, beside the recycling, was the cake I'd ordered. Lily's cake, pushed back like it was in the way. My mother kissed my cheek and said, "We only had room for 1 centerpiece, honey. You understand." Lily stood close to my leg, taking it all in with the quiet attention 7-year-olds have when they're deciding whether they did something wrong. Brooke swept through in a white sundress, holding her ring hand up like a trophy. "Oh, Mia, you came," she said, as if I were a delivery. My mother clapped for attention and announced we'd do the toast first, then cake later, once everyone's settled. Later. After the toast. After the photos. After my daughter's whole afternoon had been spent as the opening act for a wedding nobody had asked me to celebrate. I felt the old reflex kick in, the one that said, "Don't make it about you. Today's about Brooke. Be the easy one." I crouched down and told Lily we'd light her candles soon. She nodded and asked if Grandma liked her card. I said of course she did. I had no idea yet that the worst part of the day hadn't even happened. It was waiting in the kitchen. The toast ran long. Brooke cried prettily. Ryan, her fiancé, said something about soulmates. By the time the champagne fountain had been admired by every aunt in the room, it was almost 3. And Lily had stopped asking about her candles and started just watching the floor. So I went to the kitchen to get her cake. It wasn't on the counter anymore. It wasn't by the recycling. I opened the trash can to throw away a paper plate, and there it was. Face down in the garbage. Vanilla cake smeared against a coffee filter, blue icing crushed flat, and through the wreckage I could still read 3 letters of her name. Lil. Someone had thrown my daughter's birthday cake in the trash to make counter space for a champagne fountain. I heard laughing behind me. Brooke was in the doorway with 2 of her bridesmaids, glass in hand, and when she saw me looking into the can, she didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," she said, and laughed again, and said the thing I will hear in my bones for the rest of my life. She wasn't worth wasting cake on. One of the bridesmaids giggled. The other looked at her shoes. And then I felt the smallest hand slip into mine. Lily had followed me in. She'd heard all of it. She was looking up at me with that careful, deciding face, and I understood that whatever I did in the next 10 seconds she would carry it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the champagne fountain through the window, which I wanted to. I knelt down, wiped a thumb under my daughter's eye even though she wasn't crying yet, and said, "Get your shoes, baby. We're going home." I didn't slam a single door. I just decided something, very quietly, on the way to the car. The drive home takes 25 minutes. Lily was quiet for the first 10, watching streetlights, and then she said, "Was it because I'm not real family?" 7 years old. I kept both hands on the wheel and my voice level. "You are the realest family I have," I told her. "The only kind that counts." I pulled into a grocery store on the way, and we walked the bakery aisle together. She picked a small round cake, chocolate this time, because she said chocolate was braver. I bought 7 candles and a box of the cheap sparkly ones. At home, in my own kitchen, I cleared the table and we did it right. I sang off key. She blew out every candle on the first try and made a wish she wouldn't tell me. There was no champagne fountain. There was no guest book. There was just my kid, frosting on her chin, laughing in a kitchen where nobody had thrown anything away. After she fell asleep, I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, and I made myself one rule. I would protect that little girl from anyone who tried to make her small. Anyone, even people who shared my last name. If you've ever had to choose your child over the family you were born into, you already know how quiet that kind of decision is. There's no announcement. There's just a line, drawn somewhere inside you, that everyone else can feel, but no one can see. Stay with me, because the next morning my phone started ringing before 7, and the family that couldn't spare a corner of counter space for my daughter was about to need something from me. It gets worse before it gets right. Before I tell you what they wanted, you should know what I do. I'm a forensic accountant. For 9 years, I've spent my days following money that doesn't want to be followed, tracing where funds came from, where they went, and whose name got used along the way. Companies hire me when they suspect someone inside is stealing. I find the someone. I'm good at it because I'm patient and because I don't rattle. You can't outshout a spreadsheet, and I never try. I built that career the hard way. I put myself through school working 2 jobs, had Lily young, lost the marriage but kept the kid, and never once asked my family for $1. That last part matters, because the rest of them asked me for plenty. I was the one you called when the rent was late. When Brooke's car got repossessed at 23, I co-signed the next one. When she overdrew her account before a trip, I covered it and told her to pay me back whenever. She never did. Whenever was a fiction we both agreed to keep. My weakness was never that I trusted too easily. My weakness was that I fixed things. Give me a mess and I clean it before anyone has to ask twice, because in my family being needed was the closest thing I had to being loved. So I made myself indispensable and called it independence. The most recent mess I'd half noticed was a small thing, a couple of months back, a number on a statement that didn't sit right. I'd flagged it. I'd meant to chase it down. Then work got busy, and Lily had a recital and I let it slide. That was the thread. I just didn't know it yet. Here's the thing I need you to understand, because I know how these stories usually go. The woman misses the obvious sign, trusts the wrong person, and you sit there yelling at your screen. That's not what happened. 10 weeks before the party, my credit monitoring app pinged me. A charge had hit an old joint account. One I'd opened years earlier when my mother had surgery and needed someone to handle her bills. My name was on it as a co-owner. So was hers. And, I'd later learn, so was Brooke's, because at some point my mother had quietly added her. I didn't ignore the ping. I called the bank that same afternoon. I asked them to freeze the card and close the account entirely. And that's where the trap was. Except it didn't look like a trap. It looked like a phone tree. This was an old account type the bank barely offered anymore, the rep explained, a legacy three-party joint account my mother had set up years back, and under that account's terms, every named owner had to authorize a closure in person at a branch. I pushed on every angle I could think of. Could I remove just my name? Not without dissolving the whole account, which still needed all three signatures. Could they put a hard fraud hold on it preemptively? Not without an actual reported fraudulent transaction, which hadn't happened yet. Just a charge I didn't recognize, but couldn't yet prove wasn't my mother's. Could the replacement card freeze kill the old authorized user cards too? No. The freeze only covered the new plastic, and the dormant cards already issued stayed live until the account itself closed. Processing took 30 days even once all three of us showed up. 30 days. All signatures. In person. At a branch. My mother was traveling. Brooke didn't return my texts about it, so the account sat there, half frozen and fully open, with a dormant card somewhere out in the world that I'd done everything short of breaking into a bank to kill. I documented the call. I set a calendar reminder. I told myself I'd handle it the moment Mom got back. Professionally, I'd done everything right. It wouldn't be enough, and the reason why was already spending money in my name. The first call came at 6:53 the morning after the party. My mother. I let it go to voicemail, made Lily pancakes, and called back once my daughter was parked in front of cartoons. My mother did not say sorry. She did not mention a cake. She opened with, "You really embarrassed us, leaving like that." Brooke cried for an hour. I said nothing, which is a skill you learn after 30 years. She was joking, Mia. You know how she gets. You took it personally. I said the cake was in the garbage. My mother sighed. The long sigh she'd been sighing at me my whole life, and then she reached for the lever that had always worked. "You've always been the strong one," she said. "Brooke needs us right now. You don't fall apart over things like this. That's why we count on you." There it was. The compliment that was a cage. For 30 years strong had meant the one who absorbs, the one who forgives first, the one whose feelings can wait because she'll be fine. She's always fine. I felt the pull of it, the warm, old gravity of being the good daughter. And then I thought of Lily asking if she was real family. "I won't be helping with the wedding, Mom," I said. "Not the planning, not the setup, none of it." There was a pause. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "You'll come around, you always do." She wasn't wrong about the old me, but she said it like a fact, like a law of nature. And that was the moment I started wondering exactly how much they were counting on me to come around for. The family group text woke up like a hornet's nest with my name on it. My Aunt Patricia wrote that family forgives. A cousin posted a crying laughing emoji about how sensitive I'd gotten. Somebody, and I genuinely don't know who, reframed the cake as a hilarious mix-up, and by lunchtime the trash can had become a funny story they were all telling each other. "Remember when Mia stormed out over a cake?" Brooke herself dropped a single message into the thread, breezy as anything. "Can't believe she ditched my engagement over frosting, lol. She wasn't worth wasting cake on, I stand by it." She typed it again. Out loud, to everyone, like a slogan she was proud of. Ryan texted me privately, separate from the chaos. "Hey, I know things got heated, but you know how much this wedding means to the family. We'd really love you there." We. The family. Always the collective. Never an apology. And then, quietly, one message came in that wasn't part of the pile-on. My Aunt Roberta. Bert, everyone called her. My mother's younger sister, the one who'd always been a little outside the family weather. "You did the right thing leaving with your girl," she wrote. "Don't let them tell you otherwise." It was the first kind sentence I'd gotten in 18 hours, and I read it twice. But underneath the noise, there was something else I couldn't name yet. A hum. A wrongness. Brooke was getting married in 7 weeks. She and Ryan didn't have wedding money. They'd told everyone the venue alone cost a fortune. So why, in the middle of mocking me, was my sister suddenly very, very calm about money? My accountant's brain sat up. I want to be honest about how this part started, because it wasn't noble. It was professional irritation. The numbers didn't add up, and unbalanced numbers itch at me the way a crooked picture frame itches at other people. Brooke made maybe $40,000 a year. Ryan was between jobs, which is a generous way of saying unemployed. Their dream venue, the one Brooke had been posting about for months, was the Maplewood Barn, a converted dairy barn out past the county line that ran $9,000 before you'd poured a single glass of wine. They'd put down a deposit. Brooke had announced it triumphantly in the group chat with a photo of the contract, partially blurred, very proud. So where had a broke couple found $6,000 or $7,000 for a deposit in the same month they were asking my mother to chip in for the cake? I sat at my kitchen table that night, after Lily went down, and did the thing I do for strangers' companies. I pulled up my own accounts. All of them. Checking, savings, the 2 credit cards, and the old joint account I'd spent 10 weeks trying to close. I told myself I was just being thorough. I told myself it was probably nothing. Most of the time, in my line of work, it's nothing. A clerical error. A double-posted charge. But every so often the crooked frame is crooked because someone pried it off the wall. I scrolled the joint account's recent activity, the one with 3 names and a dormant card I couldn't kill. And there, 10 weeks ago, was a charge I had never made. The charge was for $6,800. The merchant line read, Maplewood Barn Events, LLC, my sister's venue, charged to a card on the account that bore my name. I sat very still and read it 4 times to make sure I wasn't inventing it. I wasn't. Then I checked my email because forensic habits don't switch off, and I searched the venue's name in my inbox. There were 2 messages. I'd never opened them. They'd been buried under work and birthday logistics, flagged as promotions, ignored. The first, from 3 weeks back, was a friendly confirmation. Thank you for your deposit, Ms. Carlyle. We're thrilled to host your event. Your event. Ms. Carlyle, not Brooke Carlyle, me. The contract, attached as a PDF, listed the responsible party as Mia Carlyle, with my email, my old joint account card as the payment method on file. I had never spoken to these people. I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to host or pay for 1 minute of my sister's wedding. The second email, dated more recently, was less friendly. The deposit payment had been declined on a follow-up authorization, and the balance was now flagged as past due. My stomach didn't drop. That's not how it works for me. Instead, something cold and clear settled over me, the feeling I get at work right before a case cracks open. This wasn't a sister borrowing $20 she'd forget to repay. This was my name, my account, and my signature on a contract for a wedding I'd been thrown out of over a cake. I went looking for the rest of it. It took me 2 days to assemble the whole picture, working at night the way I work for clients, and when I had it, I put it in a plain manila envelope, because that's what I do with evidence. I make it physical, so I can lay it on a table later and watch a person realize there's no talking their way out of paper. Inside that envelope, I put 3 documents. The first was the venue contract, printed in full, with my name typed into the responsible party field, and a signature line I'd never touched. The kind of signature you make when you have someone's full name and just enough of their information to be convincing. The second was the statement from the old joint account, the $6,800 charge circled in blue pen, dated to the exact week my credit app had pinged me and I'd called the bank in a panic. The dormant authorized user card, the one I couldn't kill without 3 signatures in 30 days. Someone had used it. The third document was the one that turned my stomach to stone. A credit pre-approval application, submitted online, filled out with my name, my date of birth, and a mailing address that wasn't mine. It was my mother's house, where Brooke lived. They hadn't just borrowed an old card. They'd been building a little paper version of me, one form at a time, treating my identity like a family resource left out on the counter for anyone to use. I sat there with the envelope, and I did not cry, and I did not call anyone. I am not the woman who falls apart. I'm the woman who builds the file. So I built it. And the line I wrote at the top of my notes that night was the truest sentence in this whole story. This wasn't a favor I forgot to give. This was my name on a contract I never signed. People assume the next thing I did was call my family and scream. I didn't. Screaming is for people who don't have a better option, and I always have a better option. I did what I'd advise any client to do. I protected myself first. The morning after I finished the envelope, I called the bank. And this time I wasn't asking to close an account. I was reporting fraud. There's a difference. And the difference is everything. A closure request gets you a phone tree and a 30-day wait. A fraud claim gets you a case number, a hold, and a clawback. I told the fraud department, calmly and in order, that a charge of $6,800 had been made on a card I never authorized, attached to an account I'd been trying to close for 10 weeks, and that there was also an application for credit submitted under my name to an address I didn't live at. I gave them dates. I gave them the merchant. I gave them the record of my earlier call, the one where I'd tried to freeze everything. The agent's tone changed when I mentioned the application. Fraud departments get bored by disputed charges and very awake at identity theft. She opened a formal case and told me the disputed deposit would be reversed pending investigation. Reversed. Meaning the money the venue thought it had received would be pulled back out. Meaning the venue's payment would, in their words, fail. I understood exactly what that meant for a wedding 7 weeks away. I sat with that understanding for a long minute. And then I decided I was at peace with it, because I hadn't created the failure. I'd just stopped agreeing to pay for it. I need to name something here, because it's the whole shape of what happened next. My family and I were not fighting with the same weapons, and we never had been. Their weapon was the story. They were masters of it. The funny version, the sensitive Mia version, the family forgives version, the she's overreacting version. They could take a cake in the garbage and a forged signature, and spin both into a tale where I was the difficult one, and Brooke was the bride just trying to have her day. Words, retold often enough, became their truth. They'd been beating me with that weapon my entire life, but it doesn't work on a spreadsheet. It doesn't work on a contract with the wrong name typed into it, or a statement with a charge I can prove I never made, or a fraud case number with a date stamp. My weapon was the record. Quiet, dated, true, and completely immune to being retold. I wasn't going to yell, because yelling was their language, and the second I started yelling, I'd be playing on their field, where they always won. Mine was on file, time-stamped, boring, devastating. So I made myself a promise to match my actions, the same promise I'd make a client. No drama, no ambush over the phone, no revenge in the petty sense, where you do something nasty just to feel the sting land. I would simply tell the truth, in writing, to the right people, at the right time, and let the consequences fall exactly where the facts placed them, which, as it turned out, was not on me. I want to be honest with you about a moment I'm not proud of, because if I skip it, you won't trust the rest. The night I filed the fraud claim, after I hung up with the bank, I sat at my kitchen table with my finger over my own phone, and I almost called it all back. Not because I owed them anything, but because 30 years of training don't switch off in a week, and there's a voice that lives in the people who were always the strong one. It says, fix it before anyone's angry at you. It says, just pay the deposit, smooth it over, keep the peace, and you can go back to being the easy one who never costs the family anything. I had the money. $6,800 would have hurt, but I could have absorbed it, the way I'd absorbed everything else. For about 90 seconds, I genuinely considered making the whole problem disappear so that no one would ever raise their voice at me again. If you recognize that reflex, the urge to pay for someone else's choice just to avoid being blamed for the fallout, then this next part is for you. And I need you to stay with me. Because I didn't pay it. I put the phone face down. I walked into Lily's room and stood in the doorway watching her sleep, this kid who'd asked me if she was real family, and the reflex finally lost. Some things cost more than money. I'd been paying that price my whole life, and I was done. 3 days later, the venue made its move, and it came, of course, addressed to me. The manila envelope on my counter got a new companion, a formal letter from Maplewood Barn Events, printed on heavy stock, the kind of paper businesses use when they want you to feel the weight of a thing. I added it to the file, but I read it twice first. The deposit payment had been reversed by the cardholder's bank, the letter said. That was me, the cardholder, doing exactly what I'd done. As a result, the reservation for the Carlisle Mercer wedding was now unsecured. I had 14 days to cure the outstanding balance, 14 days to pay $6,800 in full, or the date would be released to another party. And then the line that I knew, from 100 client cases, was the line that ends most of these stories. The deposit, once paid, was non-refundable. Whatever had already been charged and clawed back, the venue would still claim its cut as a booking fee. So even in the best case for Brooke, real money was already gone, money that had briefly been mine. I set the letter down on top of the contract and the statement, 3 pieces of paper now, each one a little louder than the last. The clock was running. 14 days. And the funny part, the part that told me everything about my family, was this. They didn't know yet. They had no idea the venue was collapsing, no idea why, and absolutely no idea that the woman holding the only key was the one they'd thrown out over a cake. The phone rang at 7 the next morning. I knew before I looked. There's a particular ring a family develops when they need something, even though phones don't actually change their sound. I answered on the 3rd ring with Lily's lunchbox in one hand. My mother was already crying. Not the controlled, dignified crying she did at funerals, the wet, gulping kind she deployed in emergencies. Mia, thank God, you have to help us. I put the lunchbox down. The venue called Brooke, she said, the words tumbling. They're canceling. They said the deposit, something with the deposit, the payment bounced, and now they're saying she has 14 days or they cancel the whole wedding. Mia, the invitations are already out. People booked flights. I let her run. I'd learned, in 9 years of interviews, that people tell you everything if you just don't interrupt the panic. You're so good with this kind of thing, she went on. You understand banks. Please call the venue, talk to them. Sort it out like you always do. You can fix this. There it was again, packaged as a compliment, sharpened into a request. You always do. You can fix this. The whole architecture of my childhood in 2 sentences. The strong one, called up for duty, because the family had a money problem and money problems were Mia's department. She didn't know I'd built the problem with my own 2 hands and a fraud case number. She didn't know I had the venue's letter sitting on my counter under my coffee. She thought she was calling for a rescue. She was actually calling the source. I could have told her everything right then. I could have explained the forged contract and the fraud claim and watched the call detonate. But I'd promised myself I'd do this in order, in writing, to the right people, at the right time, and a sobbing 7 a.m. phone call was none of those things. So I kept it simple. Mom, I said, I'm not going to call the venue. She stopped crying for a second, genuinely thrown, because in 34 years I had never once said no to a money emergency. What do you mean you won't call? Mia, this is your sister's wedding. I picked my words the way you pick your footing on ice. Brooke threw my daughter's birthday cake in the trash and told a room full of people Lily wasn't worth wasting cake on. 2 days ago. So no, I won't be helping with the wedding. My mother's voice climbed. That was a joke. You cannot be serious. Are you really going to let your sister's whole wedding collapse over a cake? And I said the 4 words that had been forming in me since I knelt down beside that garbage can. Honestly, I don't care. I said it flat, not cruel, just true. There was a silence so total I could hear the champagne fountain memory humming in it. Then my mother started yelling, the crying gone, the mask off, calling me selfish, calling me cold, calling me a name I won't repeat in front of you. I didn't yell back. I'd waited 30 years to not yell back. I took the phone from my ear and I hung up. Brooke showed up at my house at noon. She'd never once driven the 25 minutes to visit me. Today, she made it in 20. I let her in because Lily was at a friend's and because I wanted to watch her face when she saw what I knew. I had the manila envelope on the kitchen table, closed. Brooke didn't notice it at first. She launched straight in, the way she always had, certain I'd cave by the second sentence. Okay, Mom's a wreck, but you have to understand. The venue's being insane, the payment glitched. We just need you to call your bank and unglitch it. I slid the envelope across the table and told her to open it. She did, impatient, and I watched the exact moment her face stopped working. The contract with my name where hers should be. The statement, the charge circled in blue. And then, at the bottom, the credit application with my birthday and her address. Where did you get that card number, Brooke? I said. Quiet. Not a question, really. She tried 3 different faces before she settled on indignant. It's family money, she said. The account has all our names on it. I was always going to pay it back. Mom said it was fine. There it was. The whole world view in one sentence. My name, my identity, my credit. All of it just family money, a shared resource she was entitled to spend. It's a forged contract and an account I reported as fraud 10 weeks ago, I said. And whose idea was it to use my information for the credit app? Brooke looked away, and the answer came out smaller than the rest. Ryan said it would be fine. He said you'd never even notice. My mother arrived 40 minutes later. She didn't knock. She came through my front door like weather, found Brooke at my table with the envelope spread open between us, and immediately read the entire scene exactly backwards. What did you say to her? She demanded. Of me, not Brooke. Brooke had started crying, the soft kind that worked on our mother, and our mother went to her, put an arm around her, and turned to face me like I was the threat in my own kitchen. I pointed at the papers. She used my name to put $6,800 on an account I've been trying to close. She forged my signature on a venue contract. There's a credit application under my identity sent to your address. That's not a payment glitch, Mom. That's fraud. And I've already reported it. My mother barely looked at the documents. That's the part that still amazes me. There was a forged contract on the table with my name on it, and she didn't even read it. She just gathered Brooke closer and said, "She's getting married." She panicked. "You have so much, Mia, and she has so little, and you're going to ruin her wedding over a technicality?" A technicality. My stolen identity. A technicality. And then she said it. The line she'd been saying my whole life, the one she reached for the way other people reach for a light switch. "You've always been the strong one. You can take a hit like this. She can't. Why are you being so hard?" I finally understood what the strong one had always meant in her mouth. It meant the one we're allowed to sacrifice. For a minute, my mother stepped out to take a call from Aunt Patricia, and Brooke and I were alone with the papers. The performance dropped off her face, and for the first time in years I saw something underneath it that looked almost like a person. "You don't get it," she said, quiet, not for an audience. "Everyone's already booked. Ryan's mother already told the whole country club. If this falls apart, he's going to look at me and wonder what else I can't pull off, and then it's just going to be one more thing I couldn't do right." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and I'll admit it, something in me softened a degree. Because for a second I could see her. Not the golden child, just a 29-year-old terrified she was about to be revealed as someone who'd never had to manage a hard thing in her life, because every hard thing had always been quietly handled by me. We were both products of the same factory. She'd been built to be rescued the way I'd been built to rescue. I almost reached across the table. I want you to know I almost did. And then she ruined it, the way she always ruined it, by reaching first, not for me, but for the envelope. She slid it back toward me and said, in a voice that had already turned the corner back into entitlement, So you'll just call the bank and drop the fraud thing, right? You fixed everything else for me. Why is this the one you won't? And the softness in me closed like a door. She wasn't sorry. She was just out of road. After they left, I picked Lily up from her friend's house, and on the drive home she fell asleep against the window, her cheek squished, her birthday party bravery all spent. I carried her in and laid her on the couch, and I stood there looking at her for a while in the quiet. On the wall by the kitchen was the construction paper card she'd drawn for her grandmother, the one she'd colored so carefully, the one nobody at that party had ever bothered to take from her hands. And in my head, clear as a bell, I heard Brooke's voice again. She wasn't worth wasting cake on. It didn't land like a wound this time. That was the strange thing. The first time I'd heard it, by the garbage can, it had cut. Now, standing over my sleeping daughter, it just clarified everything, like a lens snapping into focus. They had looked at this child, this kind, careful, brave little person, and decided she wasn't worth a grocery store cake. And they had looked at me and decided I was worth exactly as much as I was useful. Those were the same decision. They'd been making it about both of us for years. I made up my mind right there, completely, with no more wavering. I would not drop the fraud claim. I would not pay the deposit. I would not call the venue. I would let the truth do what truth does, in front of the people who needed to see it. Not for revenge, for her. So that the next time anyone in that family looked at my daughter, they'd remember what it cost to throw her away. The summons came as a text from my mother, formal in a way that told me she thought she'd regrouped. Family meeting Saturday, 2 p.m., my house. Everyone will be there. We're going to settle this like adults. The venue coordinator is coming so we can clear up the payment in person. Be there, Mia. I read it twice and almost laughed. She thought she was setting a trap. Get me in a room full of relatives, put a businesswoman in front of me, apply the full weight of family pressure and social embarrassment, and surely the strong one would fold and write the check rather than make a scene in front of an outsider. It was a good plan for the version of me that had existed 2 weeks ago, but she'd made one mistake, and it was a beautiful one. She'd invited witnesses. She'd assembled, in one room, on one afternoon, every person who'd laughed about the cake, plus a representative from the venue whose entire business depended on contracts being real, and she'd done it because she was so certain of the story. Mia overreacts. Mia comes around. Mia always pays. That it never occurred to her the story might be wrong. I texted back one word. Fine. Then I made copies. 3 full sets of everything in the manila envelope, crisp and collated, because I'd learned long ago that the difference between an accusation and a fact is whether you can hand it to someone. Saturday morning I dropped Lily with Aunt Roberta, who hugged me a beat too long at the door and said, "Go." And I drove the 25 minutes to my mother's house with the envelope on the passenger seat. I parked on the street instead of the driveway. The balloons were gone, but I could still see where they'd hung. I let myself in through the side gate, into the backyard, because that was the route to the kitchen, and the kitchen was where I needed to start. There were cars everywhere. Through the window I could see them already assembled in the living room, my mother at the center, Brooke beside her, Ryan stiff in a button-down, aunts and cousins arranged like a jury that had already deliberated. And on the patio, by the back door, almost exactly where the trash can had stood 2 weeks earlier, I stopped for a second and let myself breathe. This was the spot. Right here. This was where my daughter's cake had gone in the garbage while a champagne fountain hummed. I stood on the same square of concrete, the manila envelope under my arm, 3 collated copies inside, and I felt completely calm. Not numb. Calm. The way I am at work right before I open a file in front of people who think they know what's in it. They thought they'd called a meeting to corner me. They had no idea they'd actually called witnesses. I opened the door and walked in. The room turned to look at me the way a courtroom turns when the wrong person walks in. My mother stood, smoothing her blouse, already in her dignified host mode. "Mia. Good. Sit." There was a woman I didn't recognize sitting in the good armchair, a leather folio on her knee, the venue coordinator, a no-nonsense 50-something named Ms. Dalton, who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. My mother gestured at her like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Ms. Dalton has come all this way to help us straighten out this misunderstanding with the deposit. So let's all be reasonable. Then she turned to the room and laid out her case, and it was a good one. I'll give her that. Mia's been under a lot of stress. Mia took a joke too hard. Mia, in her hurt, did something with the bank account that caused this whole mess, and now Mia's going to make it right, because that's who Mia is, the dependable one, the strong one, and family takes care of family. Heads nodded around the room. Aunt Patricia murmured approval. Brooke kept her eyes wet and her hands folded. Ryan stared at the carpet. The whole thing was choreographed to end with me writing a check while everyone watched, so the pressure of all those expectant faces would do what my mother couldn't do alone. So, my mother finished, turning to me with a warm, dangerous smile. You'll call your bank, reverse whatever you reversed, and we'll pay the lovely venue what we owe. Won't you, honey? Every face in the room swung toward me. I set the manila envelope on the coffee table in the center, where everyone could see it. And I stayed standing. For a moment nobody moved, because I was supposed to sit, and apologize, and reach for my checkbook, and I'd done none of those things. My mother's smile tightened. Mia, we're all waiting. Aunt Patricia decided to help. Sweetheart, everyone makes mistakes when they're upset. Just fix it and we can all move on. Don't drag your sister's name through the mud over pride. Pride. The word went around the room like a collection plate, everyone dropping in their agreement. Cousin after cousin, the gentle, smiling pressure of people who had decided the answer before I'd said a single word. Ryan finally spoke, eyes still down. Look, it's just money. We'll sort the rest out later. Can you please just make the call? Even Brooke leaned in, soft and trembling. Please, Mia, I'm begging you, in front of everyone. I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want? I'm sorry. Now please fix it. It was a masterpiece of social engineering, honestly. 2 weeks ago it would have worked. The old me would have felt the heat of every face, the unbearable weight of being the one who made the room uncomfortable, and I'd have signed anything to make it stop. I let the silence stretch until it got heavy, until my mother's confidence started to flicker at the edges, until even Ms. Dalton looked up from her folio. Then I sat down, slowly, and pulled the envelope toward me, and I spoke for the first time since I'd walked in. Before I call anyone, I said, I think Ms. Dalton should see what's actually in the contract she's holding. And I opened the envelope. I took out 3 collated copies and handed one to Ms. Dalton, one to my mother, and laid the third on the coffee table, face up, for the room. Then I talked, the way I talk to a board after a 6-month investigation, slow, plain, every sentence a fact you could check. The deposit for this wedding was charged to a card on an account that has my name on it. I never authorized that charge. 10 weeks ago, I called the bank and tried to close that account, and I have the record of that call. The contract Ms. Dalton is holding lists me as the responsible party. That's my name. I never signed it. I never spoke to the venue. I've never agreed to host or pay for 1 minute of this wedding. I let that settle, then turned the page for them. This third document is a credit application submitted online under my name, with my date of birth, sent to this address, this house, where I do not live, but where Brooke does. The room had gone very, very quiet. Ms. Dalton was reading fast now, her professional face hardening with every line. My mother's copy shook slightly in her hand. So, when you ask me to call the bank and reverse what I reversed, I said, what you're actually asking me to do is withdraw a fraud report. I'm not going to do that. The report stands, because every word in it is true. My mother found her voice, brittle and rising. Mia, how can you do this? Don't you care about your sister's wedding at all? And I gave her the same 4 words I'd given her at 7 in the morning, except this time I finished the sentence. Honestly, I don't care about the wedding, I said, level as a table. I care about whose name is on the crime. Brooke made a sound like a kettle. Ryan had gone the color of paper, and Ms. Dalton closed her folio, looked around the room, and said the sentence that ended it. If this deposit was paid with a fraudulently used card, this venue cannot accept it, and we won't be involved in it. That was when the room broke. Brooke shot up out of her seat, mascara streaking, and started screaming. At me, that I'd ruined her life, that I was jealous, that I'd always been jealous, that I couldn't stand to see her happy. My mother abandoned the dignified host act entirely and joined her, shrill now, the crying and the yelling all tangled together, accusing me of dragging the family name through the dirt in front of a stranger, of being heartless, of choosing money over my own blood. And here's the thing I want you to notice, because it's the whole point. I never raised my voice. Not once. While they came apart, I sat still, hands folded on the envelope, and answered every accusation in the same flat, even tone, because I'd learned a long time ago that you can't outshout a spreadsheet and you shouldn't try. The louder they got, the smaller they looked. The power in the room had quietly changed hands, and everyone could feel it. Even the cousins who'd been so eager to help 30 minutes ago and were now studying the carpet. Then Ryan did the thing cowards always do when the floor opens up. He pointed at Brooke. This was her idea, he said. She told me the account was fine. She handled all of it. I didn't even know whose card it was. Brooke turned on him, and just like that, the engaged couple was screaming at each other in the middle of my mother's living room. My mother, grasping for the last lever she had, turned to me and tried the old line one final time. Mia, please, you've always been the strong one. I looked at her, and I felt nothing but a strange, clean steadiness. You're right, Mom, I said. I'm strong enough to finally stop carrying this. And from the back of the room, my Aunt Roberta stood up. The room hushed for her, because Bert almost never spoke at family things, and when she did, people listened. She looked around at all of them, at her own sister, and she said it plainly. I was there at the party. I saw Mia's little girl's birthday cake in the garbage with my own eyes. I heard what Brooke said about that child, and not one of you in this room said a word about it then. Nobody answered her. There was nothing to say. Bert turned to me and gave a single small nod, the kind that says, Go, you're done here. So I stood up. I gathered my copies, all but the ones I'd handed out, and I slid them back into the manila envelope, and I said the only thing left to say, in a voice loud enough for every person in that room to carry home. The fraud report stays open. I won't be paying the deposit, I won't be calling the venue, and I won't be fixing this. Not this time, not ever again. Brooke started toward me, still pleading, and I held up one hand, and she stopped. You decided my daughter wasn't worth a cake, I said. I've decided I'm not worth being robbed. Those turned out to be the same lesson. Then I walked out. Through the kitchen, past the spot by the back door where the trash can had stood, out the side gate, to my car on the street. I didn't slam anything. I didn't cry. I didn't look back at the window where I knew they were watching. I just drove the 25 minutes home to the house where my daughter was waiting. Here's how it landed, in numbers, because numbers are the only language my family ever fully respected. The fraud investigation went through. The $6,800 was clawed back from the venue and credited to the account, and the bank closed the joint account for cause, which finally killed the dormant card I'd spent 10 weeks trying to bury. My name came back clean. The credit application under my identity was flagged and frozen before it ever opened a line. Maplewood Barn released the date and kept a $1,500 booking fee that nobody got back. Real money, gone. And since the account was mine, that loss landed squarely on Brooke and Ryan, who had to scramble for a courthouse ceremony that, last I heard, kept getting postponed. The engagement did not survive Ryan pointing across that living room and saying it was all her idea. Whether that's a tragedy depends on who you ask. My mother left me a dozen voicemails over the following weeks, cycling through every register she owned, furious, then wounded, then suddenly warm, then furious again. I didn't answer them. Aunt Roberta started coming by on Sundays. She'd never had kids of her own, and she taught Lily to play gin rummy at my kitchen table, and that was the only piece of that family I decided to keep. On Lily's actual birthday, weeks later, we did it again. Just the two of us and Bert. With another grocery store cake. Chocolate, because chocolate is braver. Lily blew out her candles and I took a photo of it on my phone. I printed that photo and put it on the refrigerator, right at her eye level, where the construction paper card used to hang. She stops and looks at it sometimes. My daughter. This kid somebody once threw in the garbage along with her cake. In the picture, she's mid-laugh, frosting on her chin, the candles still smoking. She looks like a kid who knows all the way down that she's worth it. People always want to know if I feel guilty, and the honest answer is no, though it took me a while to be able to say that without flinching. I didn't blow up my family. They blew themselves up over a deposit and pointed at me to take the blame, the same way they'd pointed at me my whole life. All I did was stop catching what they threw. I don't talk to my mother anymore, and I've made my peace with that, because the version of her I'd have to keep talking to is the version that thinks I'm a resource, not a daughter. Brooke and I are done, and that's quieter than I expected. More relief than grief. Lily will grow up in a smaller family than I did, but she'll grow up in a family where nobody ever gets to decide she isn't worth a cake, and where the word strong means something she gets to keep for herself, instead of a job she gets handed. That trade was the easiest one I've ever made. For 30 years, being the strong one meant being the one who quietly paid for everyone else's choices, and the day I finally stopped paying was the day I found out what my strength had actually been for all along, not for carrying them, but for protecting the one small person who had nobody else to do it. That's my story. One cake in the trash, one name on a contract I never signed, and one decision to stop being the family cleanup crew. If you've ever been called the strong one as a way to keep you quiet and keep you paying, take this as your sign to set the load down. You're allowed. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.